This is the TV INFORM program.
Добрый вечер. Наверное, большая часть сограждан пребывает
Probably
второй
most
день
of our
недоумения.
fellow
В каком
countrymen
государстве
are
мы сегодня
perplexed.
живем?
What state do we live
Руководители
in?
трех крупнейших республик
The
объявили о
leaders of the
прекращении
third
существования
largest
Союза
republics
СССР
have
и
declared that the
согласились
Soviet
создать
Union no longer
содружество
exists
независимых государств.
and that they are now
Новый
creating
союз
a
договоров
commonwealth
страна по вине центра
of
в глубоком
sovereign
кризисе.
states.
В этой обстановке,
This is
как
a
считают
crisis.
Шушкевич, Ельцин и Кравчук, можно и нужно
Shushkevich,
объединиться
Yeltsin,
на
and
новых
Kravchuk
принципах, и
consider
путь содружества
that
никому не заказан.
any state may join the Commonwealth. The invitation has been extended to all the republics of the former Union. Unquestionably, the parliaments of the republics have to vote, and Mr. Gorbachev yesterday proposed that they look at both drafts of the Union Treaty and the Commonwealth document. And they immediately began doing it today. I'll tell you later about their work. Today, Gennady Borbulis, who is the Russian deputy chairman, had a meeting with Prime Minister of Russia and Soviet Union, and there was a certain amount of compromise, but he said that the People's Congress would lead to confrontation. The motives of the republics in concluding the agreement were discussed by Mr. Borbulis and stressed that Russia could not imagine its future without the Ukraine. Answering the deputy's questions, he explained certain important aspects of the Commonwealth. There was no thought as to having putting an end to the USSR. That was happening gradually as the new state began to emerge. In no case should this document be viewed as an exclusive club of the three Slavic republics. It's open to any of the republics. What was your goal? Mr. Borbulis, who is the first vice premier of the Russian government, we wanted to sum up the work which took place in Minsk and respecting the anxieties and the just questions of the majority of the deputies with regard to the consequences of this action. We wanted to convince them that there was no other way out. We decided, therefore, to adopt the document, and we invite them to share our position. According to TASS, Borbulis stated that there was no reason for Mr. Gorbachev to be an opponent of the Belarusian agreement. He excluded the possibility of military intervention, having spoken to the Minister of Defense, Mr. Shaposhnikov. Today, there was a press conference of Borbulis and Shakhrayev and Mr. Kozyryev, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They tried to respond to the questions as to why the process in Minsk was so hasty. After a thorough analysis, this is again Mr. Borbulis, of the entire situation, including the economic, political, ideological, and national aspects. After a detailed analysis and evaluation of the condition in which the union process finds itself, the so-called Novo-Agayova process, we have come to the conclusion that the only constructive way out of this dead end was the legal model which we proposed, a commonwealth of independent states. We don't want this to be interpreted as a removal of Gorbachev from political positions. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia also advanced an international argument. The agreement, in my opinion, this is Mr. Kozyryev, Andrei Kozyryev, Minister of Foreign Affairs. This is perhaps our only and last opportunity to escape on this territory a repetition of the Yugoslav variation, stressing that the states which signed the Minsk document were the same ones who formed the Soviet Union in 22. Mr. Shahrai, who is the advisor of the president of Russia, stated that we see here, instead of support, a confrontation and a call to resist this process which took place in Minsk. There are other opinions. The Minsk agreement is entirely anti-governmental. That is the opinion of the Supreme Soviet, Mr. Lubenchenko in Moscow. It's hasty and not thought through, intended to put an end to the former Union and its bodies. That's the opinion of Mr. Lubenchenko. In the former republics and abroad, people are determining their positions. The parliaments of the republics were evading a decision on the Union Treaty. Today, there was a majority of the we have the fourth session of the Ukrainian Supreme Soviet. The first point was the question of ratifying a ratification of the Commonwealth. According to Mr. Plush, who is the chairman, there were a number of remarks and supplementary comments, and it was necessary that supplemental negotiations be conducted with Russia and Belarus, so the decision was delayed. It was decided that all former documents, agreements, conventions, and declarations which had been concluded by the Ukraine, especially with regard to human rights, they are an inalienable part of the Ukrainian legislation. This is Mr. Kravchuk, who is the president of the Ukraine, and he placed the question on ratification, and the Commonwealth was confirmed. In Minsk, before the opening of the session of the Belarusian parliament, Mr. Shushkevich told journalists that he saw no other way out either. Mr. Shushkevich stressed, and he opened this factor, and he opened the meeting an hour late. He said that the Commonwealth was open to all. But in no way is this intended to mean that the former legal acts of the Soviet Union are to be ignored, acts which are perhaps not present in current Belarusian legislation. By the 17th of December, there's to be an agreement on the referendum. The Communist Party's property was confiscated, and the bust of Lenin was removed. The Supreme Soviet of Belarus, by a majority, or that is 263 for, one against, and 2 abstention, ratified the creation of the Commonwealth. Today, the Belarusian parliament denounced the formation of the USSR in 1922. The decision to rename the Kazakh Republic into Kazakhstan was adopted in the Supreme Soviet of that country. In the second half of the day, the deputies and their guests filled the hall of the Republic, where there was a solemn meeting on the event of the election of President Nazarbayev. Here he was sworn in. Today, as never before, the prospects for the Union Treaty are very problematic. This is not our fault. It's been very unexpected, this decision of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus to sign an agreement on creating a Commonwealth. The decision of the 3 leaders is too fresh to appraise at this stage, but Kazakhstan has to be ready for any changes. in the future. I, as before, remain a proponent of integrational processes which are determined by the historical movement of events. Today, the President of the USSR, Mr. Gorbachev, congratulated Mr. Nazarbayev on his new position as the President of Kazakhstan. A number of questions were addressed to Andrei Grachev during a briefing by journalists. The questions had to do with the probability of Mr. Gorbachev's possible resignation, and likewise with regard to the new Commonwealth. Grachev said that the rumors on Mr. Gorbachev's resignation were not justified. As for the Commonwealth, Mr. Gorbachev, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, said that the drafts of the Union Treaty had been sent out for discussion, but whatever, they said that the leaders were ready for any solution, but if it, provided it were democratic and ensure the security of the citizenry. He called for